Welcome. One more story, and this one is on the power of forgiveness and what it takes to set us free. So, a lady some 1 hour drive from here in a village had a very traumatic experience. Her son got murdered brutally in the streets with machetes. Okay. They found the guy, put him to jail, and all the justice system, right? But that's not to say that she can just overcome and let go of that traumatic experience. It was so noticeably in this lady, in her whole physical appearance, hair, body, the diseases that have been accumulating over these 15 years, I think it was 16, since the event until I get to meet with this lady. And I she told me the story, and this was her first and one and only session on this issue, and the only one I've had with the lady. And so my recommendation were to start with what we call a stress relief. This change of perception, this change of you perceive something and it is stressful, right? Of course. Now, wouldn't it be amazing if we could reach that state where we can perceive something from a state of peace and non-attachment to it, right? Where our whole immune system could relax, even though we are bringing to mind these horrific memories. And so she sat with that into the whole brain posture, the whole brain achieved that, I think, in some 15 minutes, having the courage to bring in all of the friction and sitting with it until it releases, right? It was so beautiful to witness. And then, once that whole release came around, hmm, what would actually be good for you, right? If you're thinking of that experience now, if you're thinking of your life, this last 15, 16 years, your current situation, what's something that would be good for you? And sure enough, right, this issue of forgiveness was one that, let's say, consciously you would like. And I don't know how many prayers the lady have said, but she was not able to get there consciously with willpower. There was so much obstacle to that. And so let's install on a subconscious level that I forgive the one who murdered my son. Okay. And we did the balance. And after that, wow. Okay. Now, after each balance, here comes an important part. One thing is that in the balance, let's say we clear the road for those stones or those roadblocks that are in between where we are and where we'd like to get. Okay. Now, after a session, then it's time to take action. Okay. So, kind of like manifesting or starting the snowball, or, you know, allowing the brain to discover that it doesn't have to respond and react in the same way as it has done in the past. And so asking the lady, hey, what's something you can do that you wouldn't have been able to do before, right? I'm not asking her to go and find that guy who's now out of jail, knock on the door and give him a big hug. I'm not saying that's what you have to do, but something that could be an indication that things have changed, right? And so she came up with this beautiful idea of going to the church and lighting a candle for the guy who murdered her son, right? And that was the one thing that set her free, like finally, really, okay? And she has sent me so many WhatsApp and videos since, indicating how big a change this was in her life. Before, everything was the sad songs, and now she was playing the joyful songs. She was finally free again. I think that's fair to say. based on all the evidence that I have, the testimonial, etc. And so this was possible in just one session, right? I'm not saying that's possible for everyone to do that tremendous shift in just one session, but hey, we could give it a go, right? So check in with yourself. Is it time for you to finally face that trauma of yours? And here's the funny thing, what would you like instead? Okay. Now, facing the trauma that might be painful and hurtful and would like to avoid that, right? But what would be the trade off? Take a moment to consider instead of being captured in these old patterns, in these limited, let's say, maneuvers that my ability to expand and blossom is kind of limited because of this trauma. Let's say you had to face that trauma for a few minutes. What would be the trade-off? What would you really like instead? That dream, that expansion. What would it be like to be free? What would it be like to feel peace, to be at ease, more joyful, you know, go on an adventure? If facing that trauma for a few minutes would allow you to reach all of that, would it be worthwhile? So, the only one who can answer that question is you. And so, please check in with yourself if now is the time to, let's say, give it a go. All right. We're here to support. We are with you along the way. Wishing you a beautiful day.